Timothy McVeigh at Camp Grafton, establishing that he was in uniform, parking a tank, and he was in a tank corps when he was in the military. He knew about tanks. And if you go to that base, I was told that you go to that base to learn to blow things up and to be a bridge builder. And I videotaped the class where you learn about explosives and demolition. And I actually, just as a fluke, videotaped the books on the tables of the explosives and demolition books that were there. So this establishes absolutely that there is a lie by the United States government, by the military, by the FBI. The FBI could not be so stupid not to know this, that McVeigh was in the military, probably under an assumed name. When I did the story and Hustler picked up on it, Hustler had their investigators go to Camp Grafton and request information as to whether or not Timothy McVeigh was at Camp Grafton. And the statement from the military was that there are no records that state Timothy McVeigh was at Camp Grafton either on the day I was there and videotaped him or at any other time. So he was never, ever supposed to be at Camp Grafton, and yet I videotaped him, and it proves that he was there most probably under an assumed name. So there's a cover then for Timothy McVeigh, and this ties in with his statements and his family's statements that he was working for the government surreptitiously, secretly, pretending to be anti-government, anti-American.
And that's what all the experts from every angle have basically found and confirmed. That's what the entire images that we get with the Elohim City and the Southern Poverty Law Center and all of it. And he was going around the country. That's what in sworn affidavits Larry Nichols, as you know, has said. He was going around the country, infiltrating, getting data. And then a few days before, he got angry about the target and about the daycare center and things like that. And so they went ahead and, I guess, set him up, kind of like Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, to be clear, the Noble Lie is an excellent film. They've got another extended edition coming out soon that's reportedly going to have your footage in it. And they sent us just a short clip, but I was able to go to YouTube and pull up from, a decade ago when we first put it out on local TV, and then since it's been on YouTube, a grainier copy of, the full thing of showing what you described of you there talking to him in the armored vehicle. But there's no doubt this is McVeigh. And where do you go from here? Because, your piece of the puzzle is so important. Where do you go from here? Are there any websites people can visit to learn more about your particular work? And any other points that you think are important to relay?
Well, you can go to A Noble Lie, and you can see it on YouTube, or you can go to the website, and you can purchase the DVD. You can see the footage of me being interviewed, plus the footage of McVeigh on YouTube. Timothy McVeigh is definitely there. It proves he's there. You asked me where I go. I was harassed for many years without really understanding why. It wasn't until McVeigh's trial that I actually understood that this was McVeigh in the tank. Events took place in my life. I was harassed. I had hang-up phone calls. The people that were investing in my film pulled out. People would say to me, "Did you make somebody mad? What's going on?" And I would have no idea what they're talking about. It wasn't until not only that I saw that I had McVeigh on the tape, but until a couple of years later when I realized that this was the clincher piece, that this was the piece that established that McVeigh worked for the government. He wasn't some lone wolf nut hating the government, and that his actions were controlled. As he himself told Terry Nichols and various other people, he didn't choose the targets. The targets were chosen for him. He was set up with people. People were instructed to deal with him. He was instructed to go along and cooperate and play the game as part of an anti-American right-wing nut or militia person or just a crazy person, but that was never the case. He was acting under orders, and he admitted this to several people.
Well, that's right, and we also have just the entire program we know was a false flag event, as the film A Noble Lie and other research proves. But In closing, when did you first discover that you had footage of McVeigh? Because you'd shot this years before out scouting. I mean, you may have answered it earlier, but just when did you first realize, wait a minute, I've got footage of this guy?
Well, I shot it on August 3rd, 1993, and I didn't realize that it was McVeigh in the tank until like 1997, when I had 2 hours of footage that I'd shot of various locations and people, and I was showing it to a friend of mine, and it just happened that this part in the tank of Camp Grafton came up, and my friend says, wait a minute, what is this? He says, where did you shoot this? I said, oh, that was at Camp Grafton in '93. And he says, don't you know who that is? And I said, I don't know. He didn't identify himself. And my friend told me, that's Timothy McVeigh. That's the guy who blew up the Murrah Federal Building. Since then, I've talked to people. I've talked to V.Z. Lawton, who is a survivor of the Oklahoma City bombing, who attended the trial. And he establishes this is the man I saw. This is Timothy McVeigh. I've talked to Congressman Charles Key, congressman from the state of Oklahoma, who also establishes this is Timothy McVeigh. So this is the clincher piece, at least my part of the clincher piece.
No, it's a key. It's one of the most important pieces, and it just brings it all together, and it confirms all the other amazing evidence. Bill Bean, thank you so much for spending time with us, and I just want to again thank the filmmakers as well for helping get all the great researchers and people that have contributed and putting it all together in one film, A Noble Lie. And I also want to thank you for your courage under that harassment. A lot of other people would have backed off, but well,
you know, Alex, over 100 people were murdered that day. Little children were murdered. I have had people say to me over the years, you know, why don't you just, I actually had somebody say to me, why don't you just send the tape to Camp Grafton and then maybe they'll leave you alone? No, that's not what we do in life. We stand up for what's right. If we don't, life will only get worse.
You're right. Things have gotten pretty bad because a lot of folks just think if you give in to evil, that it's going to back off, but that's not how it works. Bill Bean, look forward to speaking to you again, hopefully on the radio. And again, we salute you, my friend.
Thank you, and I salute you too.
Wow, just an amazing individual. We're going to go to break and come back with another amazing patriot, and of course that's Stewart Rhodes, the founder of Oathkeepers, to look at the NDAA and the nightmare police state unfolding in America under the guise of protecting us from terrorism, but we all know, unfortunately, who the terrorists are, and denying that fact isn't going to make it go away, as Bill Bean just said. We'll be right back. It's InfoWars Nightly News.
Ron Paul will be very dangerous for this country because he wants to bring troops like you back from your post from all over the world.
Well, I think it would be even more dangerous to start nitpicking wars with other countries. Someone like Iran, Israel is more than capable of.
We just lost our tech connection, unfortunately.
A question for you. Do you recognize this guy? He may be the best kept secret in the race for president. He may be the best kept secret.
First, hit the mute button whenever Ron Paul talks. The man's an ignoramus, and his views are entitled to zero respect.
I love what I'm doing. In fact, I have a great club that's 15 minutes away. By the way, Ron Paul cannot get elected, I'm sorry to tell you.
The isolationist wing of Ron Paul.
The fact is, his views on foreign policy, I think, are stunningly dangerous for the survival of the United States.
He's unelectable at the end of the day.
You wouldn't support a nominee like that.
There are nominees that I'm not enthusiastic about. They haven't gotten the nomination, not likely to get the nomination.
So you're ruling Ron Paul out?
I am.
Freedom!
Now, the question is, the cheering is happening here for Ron Paul in the stadium.
We're at war here in this country, internally, and this is where our biggest enemies are, and we need to get up off our ass and do something about it. So I will sing Ron Paul until the last ballot is cast. I will not stop fighting.
So Ron Paul becomes president, the Republicans, the Democrats, the media, they're out of business. Their Ponzi scheme on America is over. It's done.
In Washington, D.C., we frequently have resolutions being passed that rubber stamp the foreign policy of intervention. but they always get passed, usually nearly unanimously. Maybe there's a few, and sometimes there's only one opposing the resolution. Our campaign got more money from the troops than all the other candidates put together.
Freedom!
Don't get involved in these wars and just bring our troops home. The more we threaten, the more we intimidate, the more we want to bomb people, the more we're leading into another fiasco like Vietnam. We trade with Vietnam now. That's a much better way than trying to impose our will on Vietnam by going over there and dropping bombs. So I would say that this just points out again that we have a very, very poor foreign policy in the Middle East.
Holding up my sign, Ron Paul for president. That's right, folks. T-Mot out here, boots on the ground.
They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they had nuclear weapons, and we had to go in. I'm sure you supported that war as well. Okay. It's time we quit this. It's time. It's trillions of dollars we're spending on these wars. A true patriot defends liberty and the people.
But you know, some of our opponents have labeled us, and I just want to talk about that for a minute. They call us dangerous.
The true patriot will repeal the Patriot Act.
Oh gosh, there's so many things to say. Representative Paul, it's a pleasure to have you on today. You are such a breath of fresh air. You must be an endangered species down there in Texas. That's all that I can say, first of all.
I will stick to my guns if put in that office and protect the Constitution.
So who are his supporters?
We're not talking about 10,000. We're not talking about 100,000. We're talking about many American, millions of people in this country and around the world who have heard this message, and it's growing, and it seems like even if they try, they can't stop us.
Our campaign is all about freedom, prosperity, and peace.
And we are back now with the conclusion of this edition of InfoWars Nightly News with another patriot. And before we go to Stewart Rhodes, I thought I would read this wordy quote from George Washington, because every day we're going to have a patriot or a control freak quote. We're going to give you quotes from the globalist and other control freaks throughout history, and quotes from patriots who stood up for human liberty. And here's the George Washington quote: "Real patriots who may resist the intrigues of the favorite are liable to become suspected and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of the people to surrender their interest." George Washington. And basically that's saying dupes and sellouts will never stand up against corruption.